And here we are, the final episode of the Buckle Up podcast, the Millennials Guide to the BRI. As always, I'm your host, Enzo Kong. Throughout the series, we have talked to a lot of bright young minds from countries like Italy, Nepal, Albania, and more. But if there is one thing that's missing, it's a critique of the BRI from China's POV. Today, I'm so honored to have Xiaolin here, who is a good friend of mine. Xiaolin is currently a PhD candidate in the School of International Studies at Peking University. He also has a bachelor degree at the China Foreign Affairs University and a graduate degree in NYU. His research focus covers a lot of topics ranging from the relationship between tech and international relations to great power politics. In our discussion, we evaluated the impact of the BRI domestically and globally 8 years since its launch. We also deciphered the factors that are holding some of the BRI projects back and ways to tackle them. Finally, we looked at how BRI is going to evolve over time and what is up for grabs for the young people out there. Thank you for your support for the series, and for now, please enjoy the conversation. Hey, Xiaolin, good to see you. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Enzo. Long time no see.
Yeah, likewise. Now, the year is 2021. We are 8 years into the BRI. If you just look at the figures, actually, the BRI is hardly unsuccessful. For example, until January this year, over 140 countries are now formally affiliated with the BRI, which accounts for 60% of the world's population and 30% of its economic output. According to a World Bank study, the BRI transport projects could by 2030 help lift 7.6 million out of extreme poverty and 32 million people out of moderate poverty globally. But of course, COVID has taken a toll on some of the projects of BRI, as in last summer, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs admitted that as much as 60% of the BRI projects have been impacted to some degree. Now, before we look at how the BRI is being perceived internationally, perhaps one way to evaluate it would be to see whether the domestic goals that are set out in the first place are achieved or not. So one of the most talked about goals for China would be to relieve its domestic industrial overcapacity as part of its supply side reform. Now, Xiaolin, can you tell us if you subscribe to the theory that the BRI is being used as a tool by China to export its industrial capacity? And if yes, to what extent has this goal been achieved?
For me, I totally agree with your idea that from the aim of China is dealing with its own industrial overcapacity, which can be unfolded as two aspects. First, the BRI is a way to avoid the involution of domestic infrastructure capacity. I think it is a common law that if you want to stop the domestic involution, you will have to encourage them to go outward to the global market, right? And secondly, China, as the so-called world factory, have abundant productivity to meet or even surpass the need of global market. So China needs more market to have trade with, right? So to create more market, China wants more countries to get rich, which so that they would make trade with China. And there are many countries want to develop, want to upgrade the life standard of their people. And then China proposed the BRI as a path of common prosperity. So I think one thing worth to be noticed is that BRI's logic is in line of the whole framework of how China has been developing itself. Like an old Chinese saying goes, 要想富先修路, which means that if you want to get rich, you have to build a road first.
Right.
So this idea also conforms to how the international enterprises decide their investment and trade. Like how would they value the commercial elements, in which a very crucial factor would be the conveniences of the traffic, which means lower cost and faster speed of cargo transportation and closer ties to the global product chain, right? So therefore, we see a win-win here between China and other developing countries.
Exactly.
Yeah. that they have a great lack of infrastructure, no matter capital or the needed technology of infrastructure construction, and China has the need and the ability to help them with their domestic infrastructure. So therefore, BRI, which would greatly benefit the boost of their economy and furthermore their ability to participate with global trade, and China would benefit from solving its own overcapacity of infrastructure and goods. So it is a win-win.
Now, the other domestic goal that is often talked about and which also appears on official statements a lot would be the internationalization of the renminbi. Now, Xiaolin, can you tell us, when we are talking about the internationalization of a currency, what should we be looking at? Is China setting up a lot of RMB clearing banks in overseas? Has it been signing a lot of currency swap agreements with other countries? I mean, how do we exactly assess whether this goal has been achieved?
Yeah, I agree with your idea that it is a tool for the internationalization of RMB. Like now in Chinese policymaking circle, it is a consensus that the initial steps of internationalization of RMB is the surrounding usage of it, then the regionalization of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the countries along the road are facing huge investment and financing needs in future infrastructure construction and energy cooperation and industrial investment. So this process creates a broad space for the circulation and use of RMB in the countries along the roads, and is conducive to the promotions of RMB's international status. Therefore, BRI is creating a vast market need and developing platform for the internationalization of RMB. But for me, I think the more transformative undergoing trend is the publication of digital RMB.
Mm-hmm.
Once it is established, a single Chinese government-backed app of bank transferring would circumvent the whole system of SWIFT, which seems to be a global universal system, but actually firmly controlled by the US government, which therefore means a systemic risk for the foreign trades of China and other countries.
Now, if you look at the current figures, RMB actually accounts for only 1% of the allocated foreign exchange reserves around the world and 2% of global payments. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot, but we can also look at the fact that around 60 countries now hold RMB reserves, and the People's Bank of China has signed bilateral currency swap agreements with 32 countries already. So I believe these numbers are just going up year by year. Is that right?
Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm. And you've also talked about the geopolitical benefits of the internationalization of RMB, in particular against the US dominant position in the financial market and the clearing procedures over the years. Now, I guess it's time for us to move on to the international side. So we must not pretend that the BRI is not under a lot of attention or even scrutiny by foreign media and politicians. And one of the most heated criticism would be the so-called debt trap diplomacy. And the most popular example would be the port of Hambantota in Sri Lanka. As the story goes, Beijing pushed Sri Lanka into borrowing money from Chinese banks to pay for the port project, which had no prospect of commercial success. Onerous terms and feeble revenues eventually pushed Sri Lanka into default, at which point Beijing demanded the port as collateral, forcing the Sri Lankan government to surrender control to a Chinese firm. Now, Xiaolin, do you think that the so-called debt trap diplomacy is merely a myth, or is there some truth in it?
Yeah, so for me, I think the idea of the so-called debt trap diplomacy is a rumor for real. Here I'm quoting an article published in the Diplomat, which is very popular and yeah, very popular in the Western media. So it said that the Hambantota port deal cannot be interpreted as a debt equity swap or the Chinese canceling debts in exchange for control of the port. Although that seems to be the well-established narrative, right?
Mm.
So actually, a 70% stake of the port was leased to a Chinese enterprise, which is called CM Port, for 99 years for 1.12 billion, as we heard. Actually, this 1.12 billion, however, was not used to pay off the debt obtained to construct the port. This significant dollar inflow was used to strengthen the country's foreign reserves and make some short-term foreign debt repayments.
Repayments to other creditors, you mean?
Repayments to Western countries like the US.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a common and popular myth is that Sri Lanka was unable to pay off the loan obtained to construct the port, thus it was handed over to China. Mm-hmm. However, by the time the Sri Lankan government entered into the agreements with CM Port to lease Hambantota Port, the debt servicing cost pertaining to loans obtained from China Exim Bank to construct the port did not amount to much. Those loan installments amounted to less than 5% of Sri Lanka's total foreign debt repayments. Therefore, this is indeed a rumor widely spread by some anti-China Western media to create a fear of China among other countries. But evidences are not just coming from China's side, but also from Sri Lankan government, other Western news or scholarly articles. For instance, Chatham House has dismissed the accusations of debt trap diplomacy, and Dr. Kodi Tuwaku, who is Sri Lanka's ambassador in Beijing, rejected the discourse trap by saying that if China is forcing us to give it to us, then you can call it trap, but every penny we lend to China is our own request. And he said that the request for borrowing from abroad is based on the independent development of our government. Mm-hmm. The willingness of China and related institutions is also out of goodwill.
Well, I guess that raised a significant point, is that the port is actually to the country's advantage in the first place, because they need it. They need to improve its connectivity. They need to do business with the regional partners. So it cannot be said that this is just a trap because they're getting something out of it. And just for the record, Sri Lanka was actually owing more to Japan, the World Bank, and the Asian Development Bank at that moment than to China. So it would be indeed a little bit far-fetched to say that China is the source of Sri Lanka's financial distress.
Yeah, that's the truth that the Western media won't tell their people, right?
Right. So yeah, it's good that you mentioned the Chatham House report, and we'll put it in the description box for the audience to read further. Now, despite the rumors or the myth of debt trap diplomacy, which might not be true at all, the fact is that some of the BRI projects have been stalling or have been seeing some failures on the ground due to a variety of local or management issues. And I'll give some examples. For example, if we look at Nepal, which we have covered in a previous episode, the construction of the Trans-Himalayan Railway linking Karung in southern Tibet and Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal, has been stalled due to the technical challenges because of the geological challenges and the unknown financial arrangements. Sometimes, even if the deal goes through, the investment would not stick due to some of the operational issues. And that is the case of Albania, which we have covered too. So in Albania, the acquisition of the concessionary rights to the Tirana International Airport by a Chinese company was cut short due to the repeated security failures and legal issues. So Xiaolin, can you tell us if Chinese companies are learning from the mistakes here, and what are the implications of these failures?
Yeah, okay. I'm not really familiar with the case of like Albania, but I can tell you something about the China-Nepal Railway.
Of course.
So for me, I think that this project is a win-win situation for China and Nepal. Like Nepal has a very rich oil and mineral resources. However, the country's industrialization level is very low and infrastructure construction is very weak, which has led to to a very poor economy, right?
Mhm.
So the development of Nepal requires a railway that can lead to the world, and the construction of this railway means that we have to directly penetrate the Himalayas and lay railways tunnels in the mountains, right?
Yep.
So it will be
Sounds very
very,
difficult.
yeah, it
Penetrated
will be,
Himalaya.
yeah, it's the most difficult railway in the whole world.
Right.
Its elevation drop will be around 3 kilometers. Wow.
Hmm.
So the only country currently able to achieve this project is
Yes,
the
you.
is China, right?
It's China.
Yeah,
Right.
it's so-called infrastructure holic,
Hmm.
基建狂魔,
Hmm.
which has the world's strongest infrastructure construction capability and technology. And the technology required by China-Nepal Railway is quite the same as it by Chinese domestic railway, the Sichuan-Tibet Railway, because the geography is quite the same.
Right. So yeah, I guess we must not forget that it might be the first, second, or only the third time for a lot of Chinese companies going outside and invest. So I'm sure they need to learn some lessons, learn from their mistakes, and I'm sure things will get better as time progress. Now, maybe a more important issue that is affecting the promotion of the BRI is the backdrop of the intensifying US-China strategic competition or
Yeah, I agree.
tensions, whatever you call it. Now, if you want a concrete example, the Australian government has already overridden the Victorian state government's deal to join the BRI in April, saying it was a first to their national interest.
In my view, it's quite sad that the economic interests of Australia have been kidnapped by its own political anti-Chinese fervor. Like when China accused Australia that Australian soldiers killing civilians in Afghanistan, which was exposed by Australia's own intelligence agency.
Right.
And then the PM of Australia was furious and said China is humiliating Australian country and Australian military. Well, we would rather say that the ones humiliating Australia are their own soldiers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So another thing that would be really hilarious is that after China stopped importing Australian coal, a large number of American coal took the chance and entered China. Well, Australia has played the role as the anti-China pioneer for the Anglo-Saxon Five Eyes, but its American master seemed not so sorry for Australians' economic loss, but instead seized the opportunity. How sure the US is?
So you're saying that US is actually gaining ground in terms of the exports due to the fact that the Australian exporters can no longer do business with China due to the restrictions.
Yeah.
Apart from the actions from the individual countries, we are also seeing that the G7 countries are coming together and announced that they are doing this Build Back Better World, or B3W initiative, back in June, which is a grand infrastructure plan targeting low and middle income countries and seen by many as the West's answer to the BRI. Do you think the B3W is a real threat for the BRI? Is it capable of rivaling our projects?
Well, I think the biggest difference between BRI and the B3W is the original logic that China is building the BRI for common development, but the US is building the B3W to contain China, right? To compete with China. So the content of B3W is closely related to competitive issues such as like ideology, standards, trade, and security. So it is not only has a strong political meaning, but also always hence the leading position of the US in advancing the initiative. So, and from a feasibility point of view, there is almost no high-speed rail in the US, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how can it be said that it will provide infrastructure for the whole world? I mean, the total length of China's high-speed railways accounts for like 2/3 of the world's total. And on the list of the top 10 longest bridges in the world, 6 of them were built in mainland China, while the US has only 2. So in terms of infrastructure construction capabilities, I think the US and China are not very far apart.
Before we come to an end, we must talk about the young people and the opportunities they've been getting from the BRI. So Xiaolin, you have been in Peking U for several years. From your point of view, from your observations, what are the students from the BRI countries have been getting in China?
For the reasons why they are coming to China, I think so. Firstly, they're trying to do business with China, and as we see that now, they're having a better and better economic opportunity to trade with China. So perhaps the second reason would be learning Chinese culture. But yeah, I think more reasons for them would be doing business.
Mm-hmm.
So
and which countries are these students coming from? Is it
I think
Southeast Asia or Eastern Europe or even Africa? Have you seen those?
right. Yeah, I think now like mostly the third world country, and as for the students from the West, I think they are coming to China mostly for learning Chinese culture or yeah, like doing business. But I think that there will be more pro culture, right? Yeah. So for the third world countries, I think many of them are coming to China to learn the China's experiences of development. So I think the greatest feature of the BRI of the international students in Peking University is that they have a strong sense of national mission. Like many people are coming from official families in their own countries. Like they have a strong sense of national pride. When they come to China, they pay attention to learning from China's development experiences and always think about how to use these experiences to their own country for their own development of their own country, right? So I think to a certain extent, the diligence and the diligent international students would represent the bright future of their country.
So do you have any recommendations to further engage these students? Or do you have any advice for the young people who are looking for opportunities out there?
Okay, so I think, so firstly, I would encourage them to know more about the world rather than the knowledge of your own country, like because you already have enough knowledge of your own country. But now is the era of globalization. So the world is evolving very rapidly. So we all need to pay more attention to what is going on in the whole world and understand the news from elsewhere, right? So secondly, I think we need to learn the skills needed in the future rather than needed in the present. Like many skills are being eliminated in this information age, such as driving and delivering express, right? So if you still need to do these simple tasks to make our ends meet, it's okay, but keep my word in mind. So thirdly, I think perhaps learn Chinese, right? This may give you more advantages in the construction of the BRI. Yeah, that's all.
Now, before we leave, I guess some people have also been talking about the evolution of the BRI. So it seems to me that China has been winding down its new investment into traditional capital-intensive infrastructure. It has been refocusing on public health, especially vaccines, green technology, digital services, and that's why we have the terms the health Silk Road, the green Silk Road, and the digital Silk Road. It also seems that China has been more focused on trade than on investment than before. So can you tell us if these are really happening and where will they bring the BRI to?
Okay, so I think actually the change of the BRI is along with the different stages of development of all these countries. I think for me, I would take it into three stages. Like at first, these countries need more infrastructure construction to start its ability to get involved in the world trade. So secondly, it would do more trade with the whole globe. So China is more focusing on the trade side rather than investment. So at the highest level, when your country is getting rich, then you're focusing more on like public health, green technology, on these more advanced aspects. Like so BRI is having the health Silk Road, the green Silk Road. So I think the change of or perhaps now we cannot say there's a really a change of BRI, but BRI is focusing more aspects and providing more suggestions, more options for different countries.
Well, it's good talking to you today, Xiaolin. Thank you for coming to the show.
Thank you too. Thank you for inviting me.
See you.
See you. Bye.
The past few weeks have been nothing but a blast. I want to thank you all and my most amazing guests for making this show extraordinary. Now, if I were to sum up what I've learned from this show, I would just share 3 key takeaways. First, the BRI is a project far from complete. Even with the grand vision and the top-level directives, we've seen that a lot of projects are still some way off fruition due to a handful of factors such as financing difficulties, technical and ecological challenges, compliance issues, operational issues, local sentiments, etc. Second, it is precisely because of the presence of these challenges there is more work to be done, which means more opportunities are for grabs. Talents who can come up with innovative financing arrangements, who can bridge the cultural differences, who can draft laws and standards which bring certainty to the table, need not worry about finding a job. Finally, given the dynamic and unprecedented nature of these challenges, we, the young guns, are in the best position to take them up. It is up to you and me to help the BRI make ground during this post-COVID digital era. So I hope conversations like this will never stop because there is never too much we can learn from each other. Goodbye.